"Get out, you're broke!" Victoria Harrington shouted as security escorted Charlotte Morgan from the Grand Wellington Hotel. Guests stared as the blonde woman in jeans and bonnet Prado stumbled outside. Minutes later, Christopher Morgan's black sedan pulled up. The hotel's new owner had arrived, and he'd just witnessed his wife's humiliation. Charlotte Morgan tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear as she stepped out of the taxi. Pulling her black cap lower over her eyes, she gazed up at the gleaming facade of the Grand Wellington Hotel. Massive crystal chandeliers sparkled through the tall windows, casting a golden glow onto the pristine sidewalk, where uniformed doormen stood at attention. She adjusted her burgundy sweater, smoothed her worn jeans, and hoisted her modest canvas bag onto her shoulder. Charlotte didn't look like the typical Grand Wellington guest, and that was exactly what Christopher had suggested. "Just observe," her husband had said that morning as he kissed her goodbye. "I need honest eyes on this acquisition. The management doesn't know I'm sending you. They've never met either of us." Christopher Morgan had built his hotel empire from nothing, acquiring struggling properties and transforming them into profitable gems. The Grand Wellington was his latest purchase, a once prestigious establishment that had fallen into decline despite its opulent appearance. Charlotte took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. The doormen exchanged glances, their smiles tightening as they assessed her casual attire. One reluctantly opened the door with a curt, "Welcome to the Grand Wellington," his tone suggesting she might be lost. Inside, the lobby was a testament to old-world luxury: marble floors, gilded mirrors, and plush velvet furnishings. Well-dressed guests milled about, their Louis Vuitton luggage and designer outfits making Charlotte's simple clothing seem even more out of place. At the reception desk, a young man named James Porter looked up from his computer. His professionally pleasant expression faltered when he saw Charlotte. "May I help you?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of doubt. "I'd like to see your rooms, please," Charlotte said with a warm smile. "I'm interested in staying here." James's eyes darted to her worn canvas bag, then to her casual clothes. "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" "Not yet. I wanted to check the accommodations first." His fingers hovered over his keyboard. "Our standard rooms begin at $800 per night. Suites start at $2,500. Charlotte nodded, undeterred. "That's fine. I'd still like to see what's available." Before James could respond, a sharp voice cut through the conversation. "Is there a problem here?" Victoria Harrington, the hotel's director of operations, approached with measured steps. At 50, she embodied corporate elegance, tailored black suit, pearl necklace, and not a silver hair out of place. Her practiced smile didn't reach her eyes as she assessed Charlotte. "No problem," Charlotte replied. "I was just asking to see your available rooms." Victoria's gaze swept over Charlotte's appearance, her expression hardening. "I see. James, I'll handle this." She turned to Charlotte. "Ma'am, the Grand Wellington is a 5-star establishment. Our clientele expects certain standards." Charlotte met Victoria's gaze evenly. "I understand. I'm still interested in seeing your rooms." Victoria's smile tightened. "Perhaps another hotel would better suit your budget. The Comfort Inn down the street offers very reasonable rates." The dismissal hung in the air. Several nearby guests glanced over, some with embarrassment, others with thinly veiled amusement. Charlotte stood her ground. "I'd prefer to stay here, if that's all right." Victoria's smile vanished completely. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Let me be blunt. We cater to a specific clientele. Your appearance suggests you would be more comfortable elsewhere." Charlotte felt her cheeks flush, but kept her composure. "I can assure you, the cost isn't an issue." Victoria raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Ma'am, this isn't about money. It's about maintaining our atmosphere. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual guests to attend to." As she walked away, Charlotte heard Victoria murmur to James, "Keep an eye on her. She looks like she's casing the place." Charlotte wandered through the hotel's public areas, noting every detail despite the increasingly hostile stares from staff. The once impeccable Grand Wellington was showing subtle signs of neglect: a chipped marble column here, a frayed carpet edge there. The service, too, seemed to be slipping. She observed a waiter in the lobby bar ignoring guests while chatting with colleagues, and a housekeeping cart left unattended in a main corridor. She jotted notes in her phone, mentally composing the report she would give Christopher. The property had potential, but the management was clearly complacent, prioritizing appearances over actual service. When Charlotte entered the hotel restaurant to inspect the dining facilities, a hostess immediately stepped into her path. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the restaurant is fully booked for lunch," she said, despite the numerous empty tables visible behind her. "I just wanted to look at the menu," Charlotte explained. "Our menus are for dining guests only," the hostess replied curtly. After 30 minutes of similar treatment throughout the hotel, Charlotte decided to check out the pool area. As she approached the elevator, she noticed Victoria Harrington watching her from across the lobby. The woman's lips were pressed into a thin line as she whispered to Eleanor Montgomery, the hotel's director of hospitality, and pointed in Charlotte's direction. Before Charlotte could reach the elevator, Victoria intercepted her, with Eleanor and 2 security guards, Marcus Bailey and Nicole Peterson, following closely behind. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you," Victoria said, her voice cold and professional. "Several guests have expressed concern about your presence. Unless you're checking in right now, I must ask you to leave." Charlotte felt all eyes in the lobby turn toward them. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said calmly. "I'm considering booking a room." Victoria's laugh was short and dismissive. "Please, we both know that's not true." She gestured to the security guards. "Please escort this woman out." Marcus and Nicole moved forward, positioning themselves on either side of Charlotte. "This is unnecessary," Charlotte insisted. "I'm a potential guest touring the facilities." "A potential guest would have made an appointment," Victoria replied. "A potential guest wouldn't be wandering around taking pictures and notes. A potential guest would be dressed appropriately." Charlotte felt her face flush. "Are you refusing me service because of how I'm dressed?" "I'm refusing you service because you're disrupting our environment," Victoria said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The Grand Wellington has standards to maintain." Several onlookers had gathered, including James from reception and a handful of curious guests. The humiliation burned through Charlotte as the security guards took her by the elbows. "Please come with us, ma'am," Marcus said, his grip firm but not painful. "This is ridiculous," Charlotte protested. "I want to speak to the manager." Victoria's smile was razor sharp. "I am the manager, and I've made my decision." As they walked Charlotte toward the exit, Victoria continued, "This is a hotel for people who can afford luxury, not for window shopping or whatever it is you're doing. Perhaps next time, dress for the occasion." The lobby had gone quiet, all eyes on the unfolding scene. Charlotte felt a mixture of anger and embarrassment wash over her. Christopher had warned her that the management needed an overhaul, but she hadn't expected this level of rudeness. At the grand entrance, Victoria stepped in front of Charlotte one last time, straightening her pearl necklace as she delivered her final insult. "We've had your type before," she said with a condescending smile, "coming in to gawk at how the other half lives. It's pathetic, really." Charlotte met her gaze evenly. "You might regret this." Victoria's laugh echoed across the marble floor. "I doubt that very much." The doorman watched impassively as the security guards led Charlotte to the hotel entrance. Victoria Harrington followed, clearly intent on making a spectacle of the ejection. A crowd had gathered, staff members, curious guests. Even the bartender had abandoned his post to witness the drama. At the front doors, Victoria stepped forward for one final humiliation. "Let me make something perfectly clear," she announced loudly, her voice echoing through the now silent lobby. "The Grand Wellington is a premier establishment. We have celebrities, executives, and royalty among our clientele. We cannot accommodate—" She waved a dismissive hand at Charlotte's attire. "Just anyone who wanders in off the street." Charlotte stood her ground. "You're making a mistake." Victoria's laugh was cold and cutting. "The only mistake was the doorman letting you in." She turned to the gathered crowd with a theatrical sigh. "This happens occasionally. People think they can just walk in and experience luxury without paying for it." The security guards shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing that the situation had escalated beyond a routine removal. "Ma'am," Marcus began, "maybe we should—" "Get her out," Victoria snapped. "I have a meeting with our owner this afternoon, and I won't have this place looking like a homeless shelter when he arrives." The security guards resumed their positions on either side of Charlotte. As they prepared to escort her through the doors, Victoria delivered her final blow. "Get out, you're broke!" she shouted, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. Go find a motel that matches your budget. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Even James, the receptionist, looked uncomfortable now, but no one intervened as the guards pushed Charlotte gently but firmly through the revolving doors and out onto the sidewalk. Charlotte stumbled slightly, regaining her balance as the doors swung shut behind her. Through the glass, she could see Victoria smirking triumphantly, already turning back to address her audience. "Let that be a lesson," Charlotte heard her say before the doors closed completely. "Standards must be maintained." Outside, Charlotte took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, but a strange calm settled over her. Christopher needed to see this firsthand. The management wasn't just inefficient. They were actively hostile to anyone they deemed unworthy. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. "You won't believe what just happened. How close are you?" The response came immediately. "2 minutes away. What's going on?" Before she could reply, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door, revealing Christopher Morgan in an impeccably tailored navy suit. At 45, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a self-made man, neither flashy nor imposing, but unmistakably powerful. Charlotte watched as he approached, his expression shifting from curious to concerned as he noticed her standing outside rather than waiting in the lobby as planned. "Charlie? What happened?" he asked, using his pet name for her. His eyes scanned her face, picking up on her discomfort immediately. "I was just thrown out," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her lingering anger. "Apparently, I don't meet their standards." Christopher's expression darkened. "What do you mean, thrown out?" "The director of operations, Victoria Harrington, had security escort me to the door. She told me to get out because I'm broke. Called me pathetic for trying to see how the other half lives." Christopher's jaw tightened, a muscle working in his cheek, the only outward sign of his growing fury. "Did you tell them who you are?" Charlotte shook her head. "That wasn't the plan. We agreed I'd observe how they treat ordinary guests." "Well," Christopher said, his voice deadly calm, "I think we've seen enough." Inside the Grand Wellington's lobby, Victoria Harrington was still basking in the afterglow of her authority display. She gestured for the gathered staff to disperse. "Back to work, everyone. The show's over." Eleanor Montgomery sidled up beside her. "Don't you think that was a bit harsh, Victoria?" She didn't seem dangerous, just underdressed. Victoria scoffed. "That's how standards slip, Eleanor. You allow one person like that in, and soon the place is overrun. Besides," she checked her watch, "our new owner is arriving soon for the quarterly review. Everything must be perfect." The revolving doors spun again, and Victoria glanced up, her practiced smile already forming. Her expression froze as a distinguished man in a navy suit entered, followed by the blonde woman she'd just ejected. Victoria blinked rapidly, processing the unexpected return. "Security!" she called sharply. "This woman was asked to leave." Marcus and Nicole moved forward uncertainly, looking between Victoria and the newcomers. The man in the navy suit stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "That won't be necessary," he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the suddenly silent lobby. Victoria approached, extending her hand. "I apologize for the disturbance, sir. We're handling it. I'm Victoria Harrington, Director of Operations. Are you checking in today?" The man ignored her outstretched hand. "I know who you are, Ms. Harrington. The question is, do you know who I am?" Victoria faltered, her smile wavering. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure." "Christopher Morgan." The name dropped like a stone into still water. Victoria's face drained of color. "Mr. Morgan, our new owner, we weren't expecting you until 3 o'clock, yes, I decided to arrive early." His gaze was steady, unrelenting. "And this," he gestured to Charlotte, "is my wife, Charlotte Morgan." A collective gasp rippled through the lobby. James at reception looked like he might faint. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Even the security guards took an involuntary step back. Victoria Harrington stood frozen, her mouth working silently as she tried to process the catastrophic revelation. "Your wife?" she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Christopher confirmed. "The woman you just had escorted out of my hotel. The woman you told to get out because she's broke. The woman you called pathetic for wanting to see how the other half lives. Each repeated insult landed like a physical blow. Victoria's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and growing horror. "Mr. Morgan, I had no idea. If I had known—" "That's precisely the problem, isn't it?" Christopher interrupted, his voice deceptively calm. "You believe my wife was someone of no consequence, so you treated her with contempt. Tell me, Ms. Harrington, is that the standard of service at the Grand Wellington? To judge guests by their appearance?" Victoria's professional composure crumbled completely. "Sir, please, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding at all," Christopher replied. "In fact, you've been remarkably clear about your values and the culture you've created here." He turned to address the gathered staff, his voice carrying throughout the lobby. "My wife spent the morning observing this hotel, at my request. She was evaluating the property, the service, and the overall experience as an ordinary guest might. What she encountered was discrimination, rudeness, and ultimately, public humiliation." Victoria Harrington stood trembling, her career visibly disintegrating before her eyes. "Mr. Morgan, please allow me to apologize." "You've done enough, Ms. Harrington." He turned to a stunned Eleanor Montgomery. "Are you the director of hospitality?" Eleanor nodded weakly. "Ironic title," Christopher observed dryly. "You stood by and watched this happen?" Eleanor had no response. Christopher's gaze swept across the lobby, taking in every staff member present. "I believe we need to have a company-wide meeting, immediately." The Grand Wellington's elegant conference room had never been so silent. Every department head and staff member stood rigid as Christopher Morgan paced the length of the polished table. Charlotte sat quietly in a corner, observing the proceedings. "I acquired this hotel," Christopher began, "because I believed in its potential. The Grand Wellington was once synonymous with exceptional service and true hospitality. Those days are clearly long gone." Victoria Harrington stared at the table, unable to meet his gaze. Beside her, Eleanor Montgomery dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The rest of the staff, from James Porter at reception to the security team, looked equally mortified. "What happened today wasn't just a case of mistaken identity," Christopher continued. "It was a systemic failure that reveals a deeply troubling culture. When my wife entered this hotel dressed in casual clothes, she was treated as an intruder rather than a guest." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Ms. Harrington, you didn't just fail to recognize the owner's wife. You failed to recognize basic human dignity. And that is unforgivable in the hospitality industry." Victoria's voice trembled as she finally spoke. "Mr. Morgan, I've devoted 20 years to luxury hospitality. If you just give me the opportunity to make this right—" "That's just it," Christopher interrupted. "You've had that opportunity every day with every guest. Based on what I witnessed today, and my wife's detailed observations from this morning, you've consistently chosen status over service, appearance over authenticity." He turned to face the entire room. "How many potential guests have been treated poorly because they didn't look right? How many people have walked away feeling less than because of arbitrary standards that have nothing to do with true hospitality?" Nobody answered. The discomfort in the room was palpable. Christopher nodded to his assistant, who distributed folders to each department head. "Inside, you'll find termination notices for Victoria Harrington, Eleanor Montgomery, and both security officers involved in today's incident." Victoria gasped. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious," Christopher replied without hesitation. "Additionally, all front desk staff who witnessed the incident and did nothing will be placed on probation pending further review." James Porter's face crumpled. Several others shifted nervously. Christopher continued. "The rest of you have a choice to make today. The Grand Wellington is about to undergo a complete overhaul, not just of its facilities, but of its culture. Those who understand that true luxury is defined by how we treat all people, not just those in designer clothes, are welcome to remain. Those who don't should tender their resignations immediately." Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is outrageous. I've managed 5-star properties across 3 continents. You can't dismiss me over one misunderstanding." Christopher's expression remained impassive. "This wasn't a misunderstanding, Ms. Harrington. It was a revelation of character, yours and this institution's. Security will escort you to collect your belongings." Your final paycheck will include 2 months' severance, which is more generosity than you showed my wife." As Victoria stormed out, followed by a shell-shocked Eleanor and the two security guards, Christopher turned his attention to the remaining staff. Effective immediately, the interim manager will be— He consulted his notes. "Thomas Reynolds from our Chicago property. He'll arrive tomorrow to begin the transition. In the meantime, I suggest you all reflect on what true hospitality means." He gestured to Charlotte, who joined him at the front of the room. "My wife and I built our company on a simple principle. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of their appearance or perceived status. That's the standard I expect at every property bearing the Morgan name, and the Grand Wellington will be no exception." The meeting concluded, leaving the remaining staff to process the seismic shift that had just occurred. As Christopher and Charlotte exited, the once proud Victoria Harrington was being escorted to her office by building security. Her career at the Grand Wellington finished in a matter of minutes. 1 month later, the Grand Wellington's lobby hummed with a different energy. Gone was the stifling atmosphere of exclusivity, replaced by a genuine warmth that greeted every guest regardless of appearance or pedigree. Charlotte Morgan, dressed in the same casual style that had caused such consternation a month earlier, sat in a plush armchair observing the transformation. Beside her, Thomas Reynolds, the interim manager who had proven so effective that Christopher had made his position permanent, reviewed the latest guest satisfaction scores. "Up another 12%, Thomas said, unable to contain his smile. "We're now outperforming every other hotel in the Morgan portfolio." Charlotte nodded, watching as a young receptionist warmly welcomed an elderly couple in worn travel clothes, showing them the same deference previously reserved for celebrities and executives. "It's not just the scores that have improved," she noted. "Look at our occupancy rates." Thomas flipped through his tablet. 92%, even with the rate increase. Turns out people will pay premium prices for genuine service rather than superficial snobbery. The revolving doors spun, and Christopher entered, returning from a meeting with the renovation designers. The staff acknowledged him with respectful nods, but no one froze in fear or scrambled to appear busy, a stark contrast to the tension that had permeated the hotel under Victoria's regime. "How's it going?" he asked, joining them. "Better than expected," Thomas replied. "The new hiring is complete, training programs are underway, and guest feedback has been overwhelmingly positive." Christopher scanned the lobby, noting the subtle but significant changes. The faded carpets had been replaced, the chipped marble restored, and fresh flowers brightened every corner. But the most important change wasn't physical. It was the spirit of the place. "And how's James doing?" Christopher inquired about the former receptionist, who had stood by during Charlotte's humiliation. "He's come a long way," Thomas said. "After his probationary period, he asked to be transferred to our community outreach program. He's currently coordinating with local shelters to provide hospitality training for residents. Says it's helped him understand what true service means." Charlotte smiled. "Sometimes people just need a wake-up call." A young woman approached their group hesitantly. "Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Morgan. I'm Amanda, the new director of guest relations. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be part of this transformation." Christopher nodded warmly. "Thank you for embracing our vision, Amanda." After she left, Charlotte turned to her husband. "Have you heard anything about Victoria?" Christopher's expression tightened slightly. "Last I heard, she was struggling to find another position. Apparently, word got around about what happened here." "I don't wish her ill," Charlotte said thoughtfully. "But I hope she's learned something." "Some lessons are expensive," Christopher replied. "Speaking of which, I received an interesting email this morning. Victoria has requested a meeting." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "For what purpose?" "To apologize, supposedly." He looked at his wife. "I told her I'd consider it, but only if you were comfortable with the idea." Charlotte considered this for a moment. Maybe it would provide closure, and if she's genuinely changed. The conversation paused as they watched a family enter the hotel, parents in simple clothing, their teenage children wide-eyed at the grandeur. The new concierge immediately approached, offering assistance with genuine warmth. "That," Christopher said, "is what we fought for. Not just a different management style, but a fundamental shift in how we define hospitality." Charlotte squeezed his hand. worth every uncomfortable moment. The private dining room of the Grand Wellington was set for 3 people. Christopher and Charlotte Morgan arrived early, discussing the final details of the hotel's renovation plans. Despite the awkwardness of the upcoming meeting, they were relaxed, confident in the positive direction the property had taken. At precisely noon, Victoria Harrington entered. The month since her termination had left visible marks, her hair less perfectly coiffed, her designer suit replaced by something more modest. The imperious confidence diminished. Still, she held herself with dignity as she approached the table. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan," she said formally, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Christopher gestured to the empty chair. "Please, sit down." An uncomfortable silence settled over the table until Victoria finally spoke. "I want to apologize," she began, her voice steady despite the evident difficulty. "My behavior was inexcusable, not just toward you, Mrs. Morgan, but toward many guests over the years." Charlotte studied the woman who had humiliated her so thoroughly. "What made you request this meeting, Victoria?" "It's been a month." Victoria's carefully composed expression cracked slightly. "The truth? I haven't been able to secure another position. My reputation—" She trailed off. "But that's not why I'm here. Well, not entirely." She took a deep breath. "After losing my job, I had to downsize significantly. I moved to a small apartment in a neighborhood I would have previously considered beneath me. My new neighbors are service workers, teachers, retired people on fixed incomes, not the elite clientele I spent my career catering to." Victoria looked directly at Charlotte. "Last week I attended a community meeting about local development. Nobody there knew about my past. I was just another resident in jeans and a sweater, worried about rising rents. And they welcomed me. They listened to my ideas. They valued my experience." Her voice softened. "It made me realize how wrongly I've judged people based on appearances, and how much I missed by creating those artificial barriers." Christopher and Charlotte exchanged glances. "I appreciate your candor," Christopher said, "but I'm curious what you're seeking from this meeting." Victoria straightened her shoulders. "Not a job, if that's what you're thinking. I understand that bridge is thoroughly burned. I simply wanted to apologize face to face, and perhaps—" She hesitated. "To offer some insights about the previous management structure that might help with your reorganization." Charlotte leaned forward. "Did you learn anything from this experience, Victoria?" "Truly learn?" "Yes," Victoria replied without hesitation. "I learned that true class has nothing to do with clothes or money or status. It's about how you treat people, all people." She smiled ruefully. "A lesson I should have learned long before a public firing at my age." Christopher studied her for a moment. "The hotel industry is forgiving of many things, but not cruelty. However, everyone deserves a second chance to redefine themselves." He slid a business card across the table. "Thomas Reynolds is launching a mentorship program for hospitality students from disadvantaged backgrounds. They need advisors with industry experience. If you're genuinely interested in redemption, that might be a place to start." Victoria picked up the card, genuine gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you. I don't deserve your kindness." "That's the point," Charlotte said gently. "True hospitality isn't about what people deserve. It's about treating everyone with dignity, regardless of what they're wearing or where they come from." Have you ever been judged based on your appearance? Or perhaps you've misjudged someone else? The way we treat people speaks volumes about our character. Remember, true class isn't about designer clothes or expensive jewelry. It's about showing dignity and respect to everyone. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of justice and redemption. Share in the comments where you're watching from and your thoughts on today's story. Until next time, remember, appearances can be deceiving, but kindness never goes out of style.